In this video, I'll tell you about the problem with making a tabletop wargame into too much of a simulation. Just to get things started, a note. What I'm about to say, like pretty much everything I say on this channel, is my opinion. It's not fact. If you believe the things that people on the internet, like myself, tell you as fact, you're going to have a bad time. So understand, this is my opinion. I made a video years ago about the ways in which I find that tabletop games are better than video games. Pachow. And again, opinion. But this isn't necessarily a contradiction to that, this video. This is talking about the ways in which video games have a leg up on certain aspects to certain types of tabletop games. I started playing BattleTech as my very first kind of tabletop miniatures war game back when I was in middle school. We weren't even using miniatures back then. We were using little cardboard standees that went in a little plastic thing, and you played on a hex and all that kind of stuff. And frankly, BattleTech is not a ton different these days than it used to be. There's still lots of little circles to fill in on your character sheet for how much damage your mech has taken in the back of its elbow or the small little kind of soft part at the back of your knee or all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into BattleTech still to this day, even though we've moved into this era of games becoming streamlined. But as you can see with games like BattleTech and others, not all games are streamlined in the same way. The thing for me about BattleTech these days, and I don't want to, again, this is my opinion, I don't want to tell anybody that they're wrong about the way that they like to play BattleTech or whatever, but these days, I prefer to play BattleTech as a video game. Harebrained Schemes made this great BattleTech turn-based, kind of sorta isometric-y, top-down 3D cool game a couple of years ago for the PC, and it's spectacular. It really scratches my BattleTech itch without me having to fill in hundreds of tiny little circles as I take damage and my PPC falls off my left arm or whatever the deal is. All that kind of stuff is taken care of by the computer, and I can get the fun a little bit more quickly. It's not going to take me 6 hours to have a battle. It's going to take me maybe 6 or 7 minutes, even though it's still turn-based. And I can play against the computer. So if I don't have anybody around right now who's interested in playing BattleTech, I can still play against the computer. Now, the thing is that we see in games these days is that there's always this move towards streamlining. And one of the reasons I think personally, and there's a lot of them, but one is because if you want to have a super crunchy, detailed game, computers can just do that better. And there's a lot of those types of games out there. In computer gaming, you have something called the real-time strategy, which is about as close to a tabletop wargaming as you're going to get, although it's not turn-based, hence the real-time. Think about the games in the Total War series, including Total War Warhammer, which is obviously, specifically drawn from the tabletop experience that we've got. Think about, just imagine playing a game as big as some of those battles that you can see in that kind of video game. Imagine trying to play those on the tabletop in a timely manner. It's going to be really difficult. It's very difficult to simulate the vast area of just hundreds and hundreds of Skaven and all that stuff that you might have in any given battle and giant dragons and all this kind of stuff on the tabletop. People do it. There are people out there who do enjoy to do that. But for the most part, a lot of people would prefer, in many situations, when you get a game that size, to have the computer do the majority of the math and speed things along and keep things moving. And that's why those types of video games are still very popular today. And it's, I think, also a reason why we're seeing really large army games kind of starting to dial back a bit. There are far fewer of them than there used to be. On the other hand, you can look at a video game like Dawn of War 2, again based off of Warhammer, but this time Warhammer 40,000. Dawn of War, the original one, was a real-time strategy game. Dawn of War 2, they took into a different situation, and they still kind of kept it sort of turn-based and whatnot to some degree, sort of, but they made it a very small skirmish game. Instead of having squads and squads of massive amounts of Necrons or Space Marines or Tyranids or whatever, you had small squads that you worked with. And then you would move this one over here, put him on Overwatch, and you'd move this one over here and you'd do that. And with those really small squads at that point, in my opinion, I think that the video gaming is not necessarily as much fun as the tabletop. One of the reasons that so many skirmish games are so popular is because they're still very fun to play on the tabletop. You're painting fewer models, you're able to get into the game quicker, the games themselves can be quicker, and taking that type of experience, like a kill team type game, and trying to make it on the desktop, and by desktop I mean desktop computers, I don't know if it's necessarily, again, this is my opinion, as important or as useful as simulating a giant, humongous battle on the computer. Going in the other direction, can you imagine trying to play a kind of hardcore first-person shooter style computer game, but doing it on the tabletop instead of on the computer? It would be nearly impossible to actually simulate jumping over a wall and firing a shotgun in midair at a guy who's ducking behind another wall who's firing MP5 at you, and the distance and the angles and the speeds. Just trying to figure all that stuff out, a 10-second gun battle could take all day to try to simulate on the tabletop. If you really wanted to get into the amount of data that the computers are doing when you're having that type of battle. So this is one of the main reasons why those games have really kind of taken over in video gaming, and the very small sort of streamlined, fun skirmish games are still something that you're not seeing too much in the desktop / video game, whatever kind of environment. The smaller games like your Kill Team, like your Malifaux, like Warcry, that kind of stuff, those things really bring a lot of different things to the table. They bring the craft, they bring the paint, they bring the building, they bring the lore and the story, and they also, frankly, bring that stuff that I talked about in that old video about the face-to-face social aspect of playing a tabletop game. And then that's why those games are streamlined, because the rules themselves are not the most important thing in the game. The most important thing is to be having fun. So you're saying, hey, that's all great and good there with your opinions, Uncle Adam, but what does it all mean? What's the final answer? I personally think that the final answer is that one of the reasons that we see games becoming streamlined is because there are options. Back in the 60s and the 70s, the reason that you played tabletop games to simulate giant battles was because there was no other way to do it. And now there is. Now there's plenty of ways to do it in a computer. They can speed up the math, speed up the probabilities, speed up all that stuff, and you can have those giant battles and get them done quicker and get on with the rest of the things you need to get on with in your day. Or just play 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of those battles, depending on how much time you've got to spend. Trying to do that type of thing on the tabletop would have been nearly impossible in a single day back in the 70s or 80s. So that's great for that type of game. The reason that we see tabletop games moving away from that is because they still do this small thing, the skirmish games, the battles, the face-to-face, all that kind of stuff that I talked about in that video, Pachow, back in the day. That stuff still is very, very, very well done by your tabletop games. And until there's some sort of maybe, AR or VR headset thing that can kind of take all that into consideration, I don't think we're going to see computer games really being able to kind of fight against this small skirmish, lovingly crafted, painted model kind of experience that we generally all seem to kind of enjoy in this day and age.